Are you ready for the word?
Yes, sir.
Turn to Leviticus 23.
Yes, sir.
Let's read verse 23. And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, that's right now. The 1st day of the 7th month starts at sunset tonight. You shall have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. So that's what we're doing. We're convocating. It's a set apart time. It is holy. A holy convocation to participate in, to recognize Yahweh's appointed feast day. Verse 25. You shall do no servile work therein, but you shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. So tonight what I want to do, is, if you will allow me, is just remind you of things. When it comes to the Moedim, the appointed times, there's nothing new I can say. So what I have to trust in is what the Gospels tell us that Yeshua would say oftentimes when he was teaching. He would say, again, I say unto you. Sometimes you have to repeat yourself. So again, I am going to say some things to you. No new information. We're just reminding ourselves. And we're going to start off by reminding ourselves that as we begin to study this Moedim, wanting to separate truth from fiction, right? When we begin to study this Moedim, we found out, rather quickly actually, that the Scriptures never call this the Feast of Trumpets. Our translations do, but they are mistranslations. The word Yom means what? Day. And the word Teruah means what?
Shout.
To shout. So there is no word for trumpet in there at all. The word Ruah actually means to shout. And it doesn't just mean to shout, it means to shout with a loud, ear-piercing sound. Come on, you ever been in a room where somebody yelled out and it made you could feel it go down your spine? That's what this word Ruah means. It's an ear-piercing sound. A Teruah is a loud acclamation made by the clamoring of a group of people. It's also a loud battle cry, and that battle cry can be made by people, by the soldiers, by the army, or it can be made by a trumpet, but we're always told which one is making the Teruah. So a Teruah is a loud, ear-piercing shout made by a multitude of people. Let me remind you that a Ruah, an ear-piercing sound, can be made by a trumpet. But when a Ruah is being made by a trumpet, what do the Scriptures always tell us? What's always accompanying that word Ruah? Say again?
To blow.
To blow. The Hebrew word takah is always there. And somebody blew what? A trumpet of some kind. So if the Ruah is being made by a trumpet, we have the word trumpet in there, shofar, and we have the word takah, which means to blow. Somebody blew into the trumpet. Let's go look at a great example. We've looked at it not every, but the last several celebrations of Yom Teruah. We've looked at this powerful example found in Joshua chapter 6. Joshua 6 reveals to us that it's not so much the shout that matters. What matters is the shout at an appointed time. Shouting when you're told to shout, that's when it counts. And this narrative found in Joshua 6 is meant to convey to us that we should never take it lightly if Yahweh tells us to shout. Verse 1, Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, and none came in. And Yahweh said unto Joshua, See, I have given into your hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor. And you shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go round about the city once, Thus shall you do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. And the 7th day you shall compass the city 7 times, and the priest shall tekah, blow with the trumpets. The priest shall blow the shofar. And it came to pass that when they made a long blast with the ram's horn, and it shall come to pass, that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout. So there's an appointed time. When you hear the sound of the trumpet, that's when you shall shout with a great shout. And the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up, every man straight before him. So notice this. The priests make a long blast of the shofar by blowing it. And the trumpet makes a sound. Here that word translated sound, kol, means to crackle. The shofar is going to crackle. It's going to make a crackling sound. Then all the people shall ruah. That first word translated shout in verse 5 is ruah. Ruah. All the people shall ruah. And they shall ruah with a great taruah. So a ruah is not enough. Every individual is going to ruah, but combined together it's going to be a great taruah going forth. How great is this teruah supposed to be? This exact phrase is found in 1 Samuel chapter 4. The children of Israel are in battle with the Philistines, and the battle's not going well. So they sent to Shiloh to have the Ark of the Covenant brought to their battle site. And when the Ark of the Covenant arrived, here's what we read in 1 Samuel 4:5. And when the Ark of the Covenant of Yahweh came into the camp, all Israel shouted with a great shout. They ruahed with a great teruah. Same exact phrase. Listen to what happened. So that the earth rang again. They ruahed with a great teruah, so great that the earth rang. It became greatly agitated. It shook because of their shout. Verse 6. And when the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, what means the noise of this great teruah in the camp of the Hebrews? And they understood that the ark of Yahweh was coming to the camp. So a great teruah is so loud of a shout that it can cause the earth to tremble. So back to Joshua chapter 6. I'm going to pick up reading in verse 6. And Joshua, the son of Nun, called the priest and said unto them, take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of Yahweh. And he said unto the people, pass on, and compass the city, and let him that is armed pass on before the ark of Yahweh. And it came to pass, when Joshua had spoken unto the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns passed on before Yahweh, and blew with the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of Yahweh followed them. And the armed men went before the priests that blew with the trumpets, and the reward, that is the rear guard, came after the ark, and the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. They tekad the trumpets. They blew into them. And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, you shall not ruah. Shouting is not the issue. Shouting when you're told to shout is where the power gets released. You shall not ruah, nor make any noise with your voice, neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth until the day I bid you shout. Then you shall shout. Verse 11. So the ark of Yahweh compassed the city, going about it once. And they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. Joshua rose early in the morning, and the priest took up the ark of Yahweh. And 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of Yahweh went on continually and blew with the trumpets. And the armed men went before them, but the rear guard came after the ark of Yahweh, the priests going on and blowing with the trumpets. And the second day they compassed the city once and returned into the camp. So they did 6 days. And it came to pass on the 7th day, they rose early about the dawning of the day, and compassed the city after the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they compassed the city 7 times. And it came to pass at the 7th time, when the priests blew with the trumpets, Joshua said unto the people, Ruah! For Yahweh has given you this city. Shout, and listen to the reason, because He's given you the city. They were to shout as if it was already a reality. They were to shout as if it was not yet to be or not going to be. They were to shout as if it had already come to be. Listen to that, because when we shout tonight, we want that to be our mindset. We do not shout in hopes that we will make something be. We shout as if it already is. We shout because Yahweh has already conquered death, hell, and the grave. We shout because Yeshua is seated at the right hand of the Father, and all of His enemies are being made His footstool right now. We shout because Yeshua is the King who will bring all things into subjection to Himself, and then He will submit them and Himself to Yahweh. Not hoping that it will be, but shouting because it already is. We shout because He's not waiting to be put in charge. We shout because He is in charge. All power, all glory, all honor given unto Him. We shout, we will not shout to make it so. We shout because His return is so. Verse 17. And the city shall be accursed, even it and all that are therein, to Yahweh. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all that are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And you in any wise keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest you make yourself accursed when you take of the accursed thing, and make the camp of Israel accursed, and trouble it. But all the silver and gold, and the vessels of brass and iron are consecrated unto Yahweh. They shall come into the treasury of Yahweh. So the people shouted when the priest blew with the trumpets. And it came to pass, when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, and the people ruahed with a great teruah, that the wall fell down flat. So the people went up into the city, every man straight before him, and they took the city. Shofar did not initiate the walls of Jericho being pushed down. The shofar initiated the shout that brought in the power that pushed the walls straight down. When every individual person let forth their ruah, the combination of all of those ruahs became the teruah that Yahweh commanded. And when they teruahed, the walls were pushed down. Verse 20 makes it perfectly clear that the trumpet was just a signal for the people to shout. And it was their shout that was divinely connected to the walls going down. Verse 20, I'm going to read it again. So the people shouted when? They shouted when the priest blew with the trumpets. That was their signal to shout. And it came to pass when the people heard the sound of the trumpet and the people shouted with a great shout that the walls fell down flat. The walls fell down flat when the people shouted. And the people shouted when they heard the trumpet. The trumpet signaled the shout signaled the release of divine power that took down the walls. Now go back to Leviticus 23 for a moment. That helps us to understand the significance of Ruah and Teruah. So now let's go back to Leviticus 23. Verse 24, speaking to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath, a memorial of Teruah, which is people shouting, a holy convocation. So quickly, look at the instructions we're given. First of all, when are we supposed to do this? First day of the 7th month. Now, that's the hardest part of this instruction. Because men have so corrupted the calendars of Yahweh, there's a whole lot of disagreement about when that is. So the best we can do is, with the understanding that we have, establish the first day of the 1st month and then follow that until we get to the 1st day of the 7th month. And we do so by recognizing the conjunction, not observing, but recognizing the conjunction of the moon. So we know when we started to count based on Exodus 12, and that brings us to tonight, the 1st day of the 7th month. 1st day of the 7th month is not July 1. 1st day of the 7th month this year just happens to be September the 6th. Not August, September the 6th. All right. The second thing it tells us to do is to have a Sabbath. Not the normal word for Sabbath. This is Sabbatism. Sabbath refers to the day. Sabbatism refers to what we do on that day. We rest. Stop what we're doing. Pause. Rest. Then the third thing we're told is we have not only a Teruah, but a memorial of Teruah. We know that Teruah means to shout, but when we shout, we're supposed to understand that we're creating a memorial. A memorial is a means by which we mark something. The shouting is significant because we're doing it when we're told to doing it. But the shouting is significant also in that we are marking something important. Malachi 3:16 says this, then they that feared Yahweh spake often one to another, and Yahweh hearkened and heard it. And a book of remembrance was written before him for them that feared Yahweh and that thought upon his name. A book of remembrance. Same word translated memorial here in Leviticus 23. So Yahweh had a book of memorials written for those that were just sitting around talking about him. He didn't want that to go unnoticed. He had it put in a book. So we should never take lightly anything Yahweh tells us to do. Yahweh says, you shout on the day that I tell you to shout, it'll get written down in a book. These acts of obedience we're doing, let me say this, two things about this. When we commit these acts of obedience, the first thing we need to understand is we're laying up for ourselves treasures in heaven. Yahweh recognizes it. He will reward acts of obedience. A book of remembrance is having our names written down in it. Yahweh wants to make sure that our act of obedience is never forgotten. But number two, our act of obedience is the catalyst for Yahweh to release His power and carry out His plan. When the people shouted in Joshua chapter 6, the power got released to carry out Yahweh's plan. Let that sink in. When the people shouted, the power got released to carry out the plan. If it was not necessary that they shout, necessary. If it wasn't necessary that they shout, He wouldn't have told them to shout. You say, well, Yahweh could have done it without their shouting. I say, no, He couldn't. Because in Genesis, Yahweh gave dominion to man in the earth. And no matter how irresponsible man has been from the beginning until then and from the beginning until now, no matter how irresponsible man has been with that authority Yahweh gave him, Yahweh has never snatched it back and said, you can't have it anymore. He gave man dominion in the earth. And therefore, every time Yahweh does anything in the earth, He does it by, with, and through a man.
True.
That's the reason we say, wherever there's a need for Yahweh, there's a need for a man. He will always work through His people. If it was not necessary for the people to shout, He'd have never had them shout. The people had to see that Yahweh had given them the city and that they were cooperating with Him, and they had to shout as if it already were so in order for it to become so. So do not take it lightly that Yahweh has you and I rehearsing year after year after year the Yom Teruah. He doesn't want us to get it wrong when the time is here to do it for real. Because the shout that we let out is going to release His power to produce His plan. You understand?
Yes, sir.
His power will be released to carry out His plan when we shout at the appointed time. Our shout will be the catalyst that releases His power. If it wasn't necessary, then He wouldn't have had His people practicing it for over 3,000 years, 3,600 years. You understand that? 3,600 years people have been practicing this shout. Must be important, don't you think? Now let's go to Numbers 29. Numbers 29 verse 1. And in the 7th month, on the first day of the month, that's tonight, you shall have a holy convocation. That's what we're doing. You shall do no servile work. We're not going to work. We're going to have a party. It is a day of blowing the trumpets unto you. The Hebrew does not say it is a day to takah the shofar. Verse 1 says it is a day, it is a Yom Teruah, a day of shouting. All right? I wanted you to read this verse because of two other words, though. It is a day of Yom Teruah unto you. The trumpet is not the focal point. We are. We and our shouts are the focal point. It is a day of shouting for you, is what it literally says in the Interlinear Bible. It is a day of shouting for you. So we're going to wrap this up by looking at an example. There is one example that I'm aware of in the Bible of people actually celebrating Yom Teruah. Let's see how they did it. And it's found in Nehemiah chapter 8. This will shed a lot of light on how to observe this appointed day. Nehemiah chapter 8. And all the people gathered themselves together as one man into the street that was before the water gate. And they spake unto Ezra the scribe to bring the book of the law of Moses, which Yahweh had commanded Israel. And Ezra the priest brought the law before the congregation, both of men and women, and all that could hear with understanding, upon the first day of the 7th month. If you read that, you'll find out, verses 3 through 8, that they spent half the day reading Torah. Half the day. And then this is what we're told in verse 9. And Nehemiah, which is the Tershatha, simply means a governor appointed by Persia. Nehemiah, the governor appointed by Persia, and Ezra, the high priest, or the priest, the scribe, the Levites that taught the people, said unto the people, This day is holy unto Yahweh your Elohim. Mourn not, nor weep. For all the people wept when they heard the words of Torah. Oh, that Torah might become that significant to us. They heard it and saw how they had deviated from it. And they mourned and wept because of it. Ezra and the Levites said, This day is holy. That is, it's not just another day. It's a special day set aside, set apart, lifted up by Yahweh Himself. It's not a Jewish day. It's Yahweh's day. There will be no mourning and there will be no weeping. People often say, well, we can't keep Torah. It's too hard. You ever heard that? It's just too hard to keep. Well, I want you to read this, and I understand that this particular verse is not Torah, but it's telling us about instruction from Torah and how to observe Torah. So listen again to verse 10, or listen to verse 10. Then he said unto them, Ezra said unto them, Go your way, eat the fat, drink the sweet, send portions unto them for whom nothing is prepared. For this day is holy unto our Adonai. Neither be ye sorry, for the joy of Yahweh is your strength. Eat fatness, drink sweetness, send portions to others. Do not be sorrowful. The Hebrew word there translated sorrowful, the root meaning of that word is to fabricate. It came to mean to be worried. You realize that's what you do when you worry? Yes. You fabricate stuff. You reach out into the future and start fabricating stuff that's not there. And it makes you sorrowful. So they're commanded, don't do that. Right? Don't do that on this day, no sorrow. Now, go back and look at verse 10. Eat fatness, drink sweetness, send portions to others, and refuse to worry. What part of that's hard to do? Man, that's just too hard. Really? Eat good stuff, drink good stuff, share with somebody else, and be happy. That's too hard to do. No, Torah's life, isn't it? Yes, it is. Verse 11. So the Levites stilled all the people, saying, Hold your peace. Stop all that sorrow. Stop all that weeping. For the day is holy, neither be ye grieved. 3 times we were told the day is holy. Now, after all that instruction concerning Yom Teruah, I want you to notice that in their celebration of it, not once was the word trumpet used. Don't you think they'd know how to celebrate it? And next notice what the people did with the instruction. Verse 12. And all the people went their way to eat and to drink and to send portions and to make great mirth, because they had understood the words that were declared unto them. They ate, they drank, they sent portions, and they made great mirth. On purpose, determined, deciding, as an act of their will, they made great mirth. They went from mourning and weeping to making great mirth. This word translated mirth means to be blithesome. To be blithesome means not to have a care in the world. Whatever cares they had up to that point were forgotten. From that point on, they refused to have a care in the world. They stepped out of their present condition and connected with the reality of what it's going to be like when Messiah returns. And they acted as if it were already so. Not one care, just blithesomeness. Psalm 100. Make a joyful noise unto Yahweh, all ye lands. Serve Yahweh with gladness. Come before His presence with singing. That word translated gladness is the same word translated mirth there in Nehemiah. It's associated with making joyful noise to Yahweh. I want to show you one other place that this Hebrew word translated as mirth is found, so that we understand what it means when it says the people made great mirth. In 1 Kings chapter 1, Solomon is anointed king, and here's what it says. And all the people came up after him, and the people piped with pipes and rejoiced with great joy, so that the earth rent with the sound of them. So when it says they rejoice with great joy, that phrase great joy is the same word translated mirth in Nehemiah 8, which Nehemiah 8 is telling us that they had great mirth celebrating Yom Teruah. Great joy here. What I want you to notice is that rejoicing with great joy didn't mean they felt good and just kind of shook or something. Great joy can't be silent. Great joy cannot be silent. Gladness is not silent. Blithesomeness is not silent. Mirth is not silent. It can be so loud that the earth rent with the sound of them. That's what 1 Kings 1:40 says. They rejoice with great joy. Their rejoicing caused the earth to rend. It caused an earthquake. So when they celebrated Yom Teruah in Nehemiah 8, they gathered together. That's what we've done. They read Torah. That's what we've done. They ate, they drank. That's what we're about to do. They sent portions. We'll also do that. And they made a great mirth, which means nothing less than they made a great shout. Why did they do those things? The last part of verse 12 there says in Nehemiah 8, because they understood the words that were declared unto them. They understood. Yom Teruah is not complicated. So tonight I close simply by reminding us of who we are. We're Yahweh's elect, living in perilous times. Speaking of the days before His coming, Yeshua said this. You can find this in Matthew 24. But He said, many false prophets would arise and deceive the multitudes. He said, many would come claiming to be anointed and deceive the masses. He said that His people would be hated afflicted, and martyred. He said that many of his followers would become offended and grow to hate one another. His followers would get offended and hate one another. He said that because iniquity would abound, the love of many would wax cold. What is iniquity? Lawlessness. He said lawlessness will abound, and it'll cause the love of many to wax cold. What does that mean? Well, Yahweh said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Yeshua said, if you love me, keep my commandments. So, for your love to wax cold means you get drawn into the lawlessness. So we should not be surprised when we see how deceived people are. We should not be shocked that they call light dark and darkness light, that they call evil good and good evil. All of that has to happen. It all has to happen. What's important in the days in which we live is that we remember who we are. Once deceived and without hope, Yahweh whispered to us and we heard Him. We moved toward Him and He kept calling. And He taught us how to love truth. We leaned into Him and He embraced us. And knowing truth has set us free from a multitude of lies. And now we're privileged to be a generation that gets to shout. For over 1,600 years, the children of Israel brought a lamb into their home on the 10th day of the first month. But there was a generation who, in one particular year, brought their lamb into their home on the 10th day of the first month, just like everybody else had for 1,600 years. They brought their lamb into the home on the 10th day, not knowing at that time that Yahweh's lamb was coming into His home in the temple. For over 1,600 years, they had stood and watched as the high priest killed that lamb betwixt the evenings on the 14th day of the first month. But there was a generation who did that on that particular year, not knowing that at that same exact time that their lamb was being slain, the Lamb of Yahweh also was being slain. A pattern had been set that was fulfilled perfectly. Tonight we will shout just like people have been doing for almost or over 3,600 years. But we remind ourselves there will be a generation. There will be a people who will shout, not knowing that when they do, their shout will be amplified by the shouts coming out of heaven, by the archangel of Yahweh Himself. We look at our enemies and they seem to be growing in strength and growing in numbers. We look at the earth and it seems to be getting darker and darker. That's the reason Yom Teruah is so important to us. It has instruction that we desperately need. Because Yom Teruah tells us tonight, don't have a care in the world. Refuse to be worried about it for one iota of 1 second. It tells us tonight that we should eat, we should drink, we should send portions, and we should shout. The Bible says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16, for Yeshua Himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel and with the trump of Yahweh, and the dead in the Messiah shall rise first. He will descend from heaven with a shout. Our shout will initiate it, but then it will be amplified by other shouts. The walls of Jericho went down with a shout. Yeshua will descend with a shout. Our shout. And this is what our shout will one day do. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman and every free man hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne, and hide us from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? One day we will shout. One day we will shout, and the heavens will roll back, and the King of glory shall come. Amen. Stand up. Is tonight a rehearsal? That is the holiness of the day, is we don't know. Is tonight a rehearsal, or does it release His power? Hallelujah. Well, can you cast away all care? Can you for at least 24 hours live as if you have no care in the world? Do you think you could muster up the strength to eat good things and drink sweet things tonight? Yes. And carry something to somebody else. That's what Yahweh told us to do. So I say to you, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, when you hear the sound of the trumpet, I want you to shout with an ear-piercing sound. Hallelujah. There's something about shouting that makes you happy on the inside, isn't there? Boy, that felt good. Glory. Yahweh said do it. Now it's written down in a book. It's a memorial that will say this little group of people, this assembly, rehearsed my coming. Yes. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. As His name is put upon you, so shall He Himself bless you.